Welcome to the State Report Card Early Literacy Component webinar. This is the link to our PowerPoint and other resources. So we're going to give a second for those that are logging in to be able to access this. There's a PDF version of this PowerPoint and also other resources and links. Your state support team that will be supporting you today, I'm Eric Neal. I'm joined by Dr. Morgan Fagnani. We are here to help and answer your questions. This is a link to the Early Literacy Resources webpage from the Ohio Department of Education. This has links to technical documents, overviews, all sorts of the really deep, in-depth resources and things you'll need if you're trying to figure out exactly all of the calculations and things like that. Today is going to be much more of an overview, and we really just want you to walk away with an understanding of how this component is calculated. All right, so today's focus, we're really kind of just trying to give you the here's what, so what, now what. We want to show you the data, the parts of the early literacy component, how they're calculated, what this tells us, what the data means and how is it meaningful to us, and then some ideas and things that we can do going forward to help affect this and get better outcomes for our students. We're going to have a 45-minute section of time at the end of this for you guys to ask your individual questions. But if you have questions that come up before that, go ahead and just put them in the chat, and we will make sure to go through the chat and answer those questions at the end. But we kind of don't want to stop and get sidetracked with individual specific questions in the beginning. We're just going to go through and click through the slides and make sure that everybody knows what their information is before we stop and answer questions.
All right. So again, I'm Morgan Fagnani. So glad you could join us today. We are going to start from the very beginning. Okay. So when we are looking at the report card, you type in ODE report cards into Google, or you go to that link that is on the bottom of that page. This is where you will end up. Okay. So you can search for your school, your district. You can just type it in that box. And then once you do that, it'll take you to our next screen. Okay, so this is the next landing page that you will end up on after that first screen. Okay, so from at this location, you'll see a lot of your school or district details. At the top left, you can see district at a glance. I have a screenshot of that also on the right. These are all of the areas that you can click on to find the area you want to dive into. You can also see the overall rating. That's an important tab that just gives you like a home base for your school or district that walks you through each of the components as well as the stars that you received in each of the components and also overall. Okay, so this is that overall rating page. Again, like I just talked about, you can see that overall rating. This is the first year that we have overall ratings in a few years, so that's very exciting. And then you can also see down below, you have the components that are listed as well as the stars that are associated with those components. You'll see early literacy on the bottom. That's where we're going to focus our time and energy today. But I just wanted to walk you through initially, like, how do we get here? Where do I go to see where my stars are reported? Okay, so that's how you get there. So when you click on that early literacy, back on that home screen, if you just went to early literacy at first, this is where you will end up. Okay, so I wanted to walk you through this page to start. You can see at the top the different tabs. You see the early literacy component tab. This is what reports your percentage. You can see the other tabs, which we'll dive into here in a little bit. But you see that 71.1% right there. And then down below, the image below is not actually on the report card, but this is where you go to find the percentages and what those mean in terms of stars. You can also see in this section the 3 measures as well as the percentage in each of those measures. It looks confusing at first when you think about, you see the 59.4, you see 100, and you see 49.2, and then your overall component score of a 71.1. How in the world did we get there? We're going to dive into that in just a minute as well. But again, this screen is just the landing page to tell you your percentage in this specific component. Okay, so again, a similar image here. I wanted to draw very specific lines to the information and how things are computed. Okay, so again, you see that 71.1%. You see that line going down to that green area under 3 stars. That 71.1% falls in that 68 to 78%, which would be 3 stars. And then you can see that other line going right back to the report card landing page. Okay, under early literacy, you see that 71.1% takes you to 3 stars in early literacy. Okay, so that's how everything is reported. Now we're going to dive into the more specifics of this component. So this is the here's what section of our presentation. So the here's what is the data? What are we looking at? So the bottom of this screen, that's exactly what the here's what for this component. So for the early literacy component, there are 3 measures. Okay, the first one, proficiency in 3rd grade reading. Okay, we're going to dive into each of these here in a little bit, but I wanted you to see on this screen, more specifically, each of the measures and their weight. Okay, so again, you see proficiency in 3rd grade reading. Okay, you see the percentage is 59.4%. Okay, but the weight for that specific measure is 40%. So when we take that 40% weight, when looking at that 59.4%, the weighted percent ends up being 23.8%. Okay, same thing for promotion to 4th grade and improving K-3 literacy. Okay, you see the percentages. You see that promotion to 4th grade is 35% of the weight, and you see the improving K-3 literacy is 25% of the weight. Okay, when you add all of those things up, that's when you get to your 71.1%. Again, you see at the top of the screen, that falls into that green area, which takes you to the 3 stars for the component. Okay, this is some information from the technical document. I thought this was important to note. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, the 3 measures. Okay, they're listed down the left side of the screen. Okay, again, proficiency in 3rd grade, promotion, improving K-3 literacy. Okay, the typical calculation is on the right. Okay, you can see the 40%, 35%, 25%. That's what we just went through. Okay, you can also see on the left side, you see that 60% and 40%. Okay, there are other scenarios where this type of thing can happen. You can also see other scenarios down at the bottom. Okay, you see that bolded black line, you can see NA listed on some of the measures. We're going to go to the next screen and I'm going to walk through a few scenarios of when this can happen and how this can happen. Okay, so again, you see those weighted adjustments, okay, and then you also see all the way to the right, we have 1, 2, and 3, okay, that's going to walk us through our scenarios, okay. So I'm not going to read all of this specifically to you. This is only going to impact certain schools, certain districts, but we wanted you to have this as a resource. So if down the road, if it comes to this and you have a certain scenario that you run into, you would have this as a resource to pull back out. So in scenario 1, you see 100% in proficiency in 3rd grade reading. Okay, and then the other 2 measures are NA. So how could that happen? So in this scenario, this has to do with enrollment, and there are more strict enrollment criteria for the promotion of 4th grade and improving K-3 literacy. For proficiency in reading, enrollment just has to be during that 3rd grade year and time spent in that same school in that 3rd grade year. So again, there's more strict enrollment criteria for the other 2 measures. So 100% in that scenario would go to proficiency in 3rd grade reading. Promotion to 4th grade. So we would have 100% there and not applicable in the other 2 measures. This could happen when there are not enough students to calculate the other measure. Okay, so that's how that scenario works. And then our final scenario, the improving K-3 literacy, I would say this is the scenario that is most likely if you have an alternative scenario. So this could happen if it's a K-2 school and there was not a 3rd grade class in that school. Okay, so that's how that scenario could happen. All right, now we are going to dive into, these are some layout changes on the report card this year, but we're going to dive into each of these measures a little bit deeper. You can see the tabs at the top that I referenced earlier in the presentation. Okay, that early literacy component all the way to the left, that was that landing page where we saw the overall percentage, that 71.1%. When we click over to the early literacy component details, okay, you can see that yellow writing. Right now, we're just looking at proficiency in third grade reading. Okay, so what is this measure looking at? A lot of people tend to get caught up in this measure because they believe the percentage here should also match the percentage of proficient students in third grade. Okay, so something you need to keep in mind here is that this is the sub-score for reading only. Okay, so to get that 59.4%, students had to have that sub-score of 50 or higher in reading. Okay, so what does that mean? We are not looking at the writing portion of that third grade test. We are looking at that informational text and literary text. Okay, when we look at those scores, do we have a sub-score of 50 or higher? And in this scenario, 59.4% of the students had a sub-score of 50 or higher, again, just in literary text or informational text and not in writing. Okay, writing is not impacted in this proficiency in third grade reading. Okay, the second measure. Now we've moved on to promotion to fourth grade. This is probably the most self-explanatory measure that's involved in this indicator. This just looks at the percentage of third grade students who were promoted to fourth grade. Something that I did want to note, you see that red dot within that blue line. What that means is that those students participated in all grades in that same building. Okay, so there's a lot of valuable conversations you can have either in TBTs at the third grade level, in your BLTs, talking about where does that fall and how are our students who have been with us since kindergarten, how are those students doing when it comes to promotion to fourth grade? A lot of great data pieces, a lot of great conversations you can have there. And then the last measure, I will be very honest with you, this is probably the most confusing portion of this measure. I've spent a lot of time digging into report card information, digging into what K-3 literacy means, how this report card is calculated, especially when it comes to this measure. And this portion, there's a lot here. You can read through the technical documents multiple times and still have a lot of questions. So I understand where the confusion comes here, but our goal here is to hopefully break this down for you so you can walk away understanding how it's calculated, and as well as internally, you can look at the systems you have in place to know where this measure is coming from. Okay, so improving K-3 literacy, what is this? Essentially, just in like quick summary, 1 to 2 sentences, improving K-3 literacy is looking at your fall to fall diagnostic data and which students have you identified on track, which students have you identified off track, and then looking at those off track students, which students were then moving to on track. Okay, that's what that's looking at, and we're going to get into it a little deeper here. Okay, now we've moved, you can see again, our tabs at the top. Okay, we were just on early literacy component details. Now we're on the fall reading diagnostics. Okay, so this is where a lot of people tend to get hung up. Okay, I'll give you a second to familiarize with the screen. Okay, the top, we have fall 2021 diagnostic data. And then the chart at the bottom, we have fall 2022. Okay, what a lot of people want to do here is look at fall 2021 kindergarten, look at the blue. A lot of people want to then go down to fall 2022 and look at first grade. And then they want to talk about the change. Okay, that's difficult to do here. I don't recommend doing that. These are not the same students. There could be a lot of situations here while the data might look a certain way. There are great conversations you can have with this information, but again, these are not the same students from year to year. So I would not try to make comparisons between these two charts, okay? The blue you can see are the percentage of students not on RIMS. Those are our on-track students. And then the red you can see our number of percentage of students that are on RIMS. Okay, these are our off-track students. Again, this is information only. Okay, information only means that this does not contribute to the early literacy calculation. Okay, just information for you to internally look at your systems, for you to have information on what students were on track, what students were off track at each of those grade levels between each of those 2 years. Okay, now we are on that final tab. Okay, improving K3 literacy measure details. Okay, this is where you want to focus your attention when it comes to that measure. Okay, so you can see on the left, okay, this line represents all the students that were off track in kindergarten. Okay, again, we're not looking at on track students here. These are all of our off track students. So if you look at that 100%, okay, the 42.3 plus the 57.7 equals 100%. Okay, when we think about 100%, these were all of the students that were off track in kindergarten. Okay, our on track students are not seen here. Okay, it then shows the percentage of those off track students that moved to on track, as well as those that remained off track in first grade. So that blue line represents from kindergarten to first grade, the students that moved from off track to on track. And then that red portion shows you the students that remained off track. Okay. And again, this is the information that is used to determine that measure of the early literacy component.
So I want to move forward. We're moving to the here's what portion of this, and so what. So what are we going to do about this? How can we use this information? We can use it to check the validity of our screener, to see if our tier 1 curriculum is an issue. If we can maybe try and compare it to our chronic absentee numbers and see if that might be something. And we can also look and see if our interventions are effective at the different grade levels. So I want you guys to go ahead and put in the chat, what is your current process for identifying the cut scores for who goes on a RIMP? So you've got your diagnostic that your district has chosen, and what is your current process? How do you decide what that cut score is for who goes on a RIMP? And just type it in the chat. If you don't know, it's okay just to say, I'm not sure who does that in our district. We just know that it's X, Y, or Z number. Okay, and while you guys are doing that, I'm going to turn it back over to Morgan.
Thank you, Eric. All right, so we are going to dive into a few of these questions, okay? So how valid is my screener? Okay, so on the top left, you again see that proficiency in third grade, okay? We've been talking about that a little bit already, okay? This, again, is that 56.4%. So in spring 2023, 56.4% of third graders were on track in reading, again, on that reading portion of the Ohio State test. Okay, then let's look at our fall 2022 diagnostic. That's on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, when you look at that, the third grade diagnostic, you see 82%. Okay, 82% of our students are on track in the fall for reading. Okay, so when you think about those two things, you may want to look at your screener in terms of how many of our students did we put on RIMPs and compare that to your proficiency in third grade reading. Is your screener valid? Are you able to identify the students you have that do have reading deficits? Okay, what we would like to see is that these numbers are closer together. If we're saying that 82% of our students are on track in the fall, we would hope to see around that same percentage are proficient in reading when they take that Ohio State test in the spring. Okay, in this specific example, we have a pretty drastic difference between that 82% and that 56%. So is the screener valid? Are we identifying the students that we are needed for reading deficits? Are there other data pieces we need to look at? Okay, there are a lot of valuable conversations you can have here, especially when it comes to comparing these numbers. Again, you want to see a close comparison between the third grade diagnostic on track status and the proficiency in third grade reading percentage on your report card. Okay, so some things to consider as you are working through your specific report card. Okay, again, you can see the tabs that we've worked throughout this presentation. Okay, the fall reading diagnostics, you can see tier 1 core there. Eric, if you'd like to go to the next screen, thank you. Okay, so on the right, you can see the fall reading diagnostics. This tab, you want to consider your tier 1, your core instruction here. Okay, are you at 80% in each of your grade levels? If you are not, okay, what can you do to strengthen your core curriculum? Okay, again, you want to look at this specific tab and consider your core instruction. You can see to the left, there are some different things there that you can look at that have been provided by the Department of Education, things to help you when looking at your tier 1 core instruction. So again, fall reading diagnostics, this is a great tab to look at with your teams when it comes to identifying and evaluating your tier 1 instruction. Okay, now we've moved on to the next tab. You can see intervention here. That's what we want to think intervention-wise when we're looking at the improving K-3 literacy measure details. Okay, so what do we want to look at? Again, you see that the chart with the students that were all off track and the percentage that moved to on track. Okay, you want to think intervention here. Okay, what did we do? What is working that helped these students in the blue move to on track status? Okay, this will help you evaluate and look at the intervention programs you have in place. Okay, so again, fall reading diagnostics, you want to be looking at your tier 1 core and the improving K-3 literacy. You can start having great conversations about your intervention programs you have.
Okay, so we have the now what. We did the here's what, the so what, we have the now what. These are some possible questions to consider as you're talking with your team about your K-3 literacy program and your setup and what these numbers on the K-3 literacy component are telling you. What has been the focus to improve achievement? What have you been working on? What does the data say in terms of how that has worked so far? You know, where are the bright spots? It's always important to go back and look at these things that are working well, so you can replicate them and you can celebrate the successes of what's been happening. You know, what's going on there? How can you pass it on, make sure you're doing it in more places? What's happening at tier 1? What's happening for intervention? And who is at the table when you're discussing these things? You know, at the district level, you may have your curriculum department, you may have people from your district leadership team or different things like that. But do you have teachers involved in the conversation? Are they able to talk to you about how the use of the curriculum and the resources are going? It's important to make sure that you're having these conversations with all of your stakeholders so that they're meaningful and you can get all of the information that you need. Who might be missing from this? Make sure that you have as many people as possible when it makes sense to do that. And in what ways can we shift our focus from admiring the problem to implementing best practices? You know, if we look at that and we find out that our screener isn't really valid, or we find out that our tier 1 instruction isn't really meeting the needs of the majority of our students, what are we doing? What are our next steps to move on to start addressing those problems instead of just admiring the problem and doing the same things as we move forward throughout the next school year? So questions and answers. We want to start with, before we get to your individual questions that you have right now, when you registered, we asked you a question about what you were looking for specifically, and we tried to go through and make sure that we answered those in our slides so that you were able to get those answers to your specific questions. So how is the component calculated? If you go back and look at our slides in this presentation, slides 4 and 5, and see pages 3 and 4 of the early literacy component technical document, that is going to give you that detailed breakdown of how this is calculated. Hopefully, the general explanation that we did helps you conceptualize it enough to explain it to teachers or parents. But if you're one of those people that really want to get into the weeds on that, the technical document is the place to go for that. Okay, this question is, what information needs to be reported to EMIS? If you look on the left of the screen there, it has the different information and the dates that it needs to be reported. There is a copy of this in our folder that we shared with you at the beginning as well, or you can follow that tiny URL. Another question is, our district is not rated in the component. How can we strengthen our early literacy efforts? Consider reaching out to the state support team's early literacy specialist, Jessica Jackson. Her email information is here. She's our RELS, Regional Early Learning Specialist, and she will be able to answer your questions, talk about your systems, line you up with different training opportunities that we'll have here, or coaching with herself or the person that is assigned to your district if you are in differentiated accountability. And you can also visit our organization's professional learning calendar of events. It will be posted here very soon on the SST11 website. That's sst11.org. How is it calculated given the adjustments to third grade reading guarantee that were made in the summer of 2023? So the main thing here that we talked about is students promoted to fourth grade must continue to receive at least 90 minutes of daily reading instruction that includes intensive interventions until the student is able to read at grade level. So if you think about this, basically we found out that just holding kids back wasn't really helping, and we wanted to make sure that kids as much as possible were able to stay with their cohorts, but we do need to continue on supporting these kids. We can't just say, well, you made it to fourth grade, we're good, if we know that a large portion of them were not proficient on the state report card. And guidance for this academic year can be found in the shared folder, like we said, under the links page. And how do early literacy scores compare across the state? This shows all the different components of the report card. But if you look, needs support or needs a lot of support, half of our state roughly is in the 1 or 2 star category. One of the main reasons we decided to do this webinar, rather than just posting links or things on the web pages, we wanted you to understand how this was calculated so that you could start having those conversations with your building leadership team, with your district leadership team, with your reading team, and make sure that you understood how these components were calculated and you were able to put some plans in place. So this is where we would like to answer any of your additional questions. So you can go ahead and put those in the chat, or you can unmute and just go ahead and ask them, and Morgan and I will hopefully be able to answer them. Okay, just give like 1 more minute if anyone can think of anything. Again, please feel free to reach out to us one-on-one if you have a question that you think of later.
1 minute.
Okay.
Do you want me to unmute?
Yep.
All right, I see Angela. Thank you for posing a question. For those of you that didn't see her question, she asks, for those students that were promoted this summer without passing the third grade reading guarantee, will we have to report their intervention? So this is a great question. I have not seen specific guidance on the rollout of this yet. I will tell you what I know, and we can get back to you on the specific answer to your question. And we can add that to our slides that will be in that warehoused link that we sent. But the students that have moved on who did not meet that third grade reading guarantee Okay, you've probably seen that these students will have to also continue to be on RIMS until they reach grade level proficiency. Okay, I have not seen specific guidance on what does grade level proficiency mean? Is that going to be now when you're a fourth grader, are you at 700? And as well as I have not seen specifics on will it be the same reporting as it was for K3 students on RIMS. So we can get back to you on that, but we do know that the students that have moved on without reading proficiency, those students will have to be on RIMS until they meet proficiency. Okay, that is what we know at this point. And again, we will add a slide to our presentation with what we find out in regard to your specific question.
And we're still good to answer questions, even though I clicked the next slide. Do you see any more questions? Okay, there's the link for that. All right. Well, I think if we don't have any more questions, again, like I said, please feel free to reach out to Morgan or or Jessica. A great resource if you have these really detailed, specific questions, especially on how to make improvements to your system to get better outcomes. This is the contact information for State Support Team 11. This goes to our general inbox. You can be directed to one of us if you need specific help there.
Back to the slide for them to do the survey.
Did I miss the survey slide? I will.
Thank you.
So please take a moment. It's very helpful to us to be able to get your feedback on this. If you use this QR code, it will take you to the survey. It will also get you your one contact hour that you can use for your CEUs when you're renewing your license. And we really would appreciate the feedback. If you have specific questions in there, we will make sure that we get them into the resources and the slides. And we use all of this information to improve our trainings as we develop them. And Morgan will also put a link in the chat for you that do not want to use the QR code. So here's our link to our socials. We have our Facebook page, our Twitter page, and the link to our podcast page on Transistor. Please feel free to check all of those out. Stay in touch with us there. We post pictures of our trainings, links to registration for upcoming events. We'd love to have you follow us on our socials.